A common theme in our academy and camps is refusing certain things. I refuse to get stressed out over this wrestling match. I refuse to be in a bad mood and make my family and teachers and friends miserable because I have to cut weight. I'm going to accept it. I refuse to fall apart after a loss. I refuse to let the referee or a bad call or a coach who's in a bad mood get to me. Sometimes it's hard to say, I'm going to be tougher, unless you refuse to be weak. Sometimes it's hard to say, I'm going to do a better job of controlling my weight and my emotions while I'm cutting weight and miserable, because you're going to be miserable. That will never, ever stop it. It only gets easier when you accept it. But by refusing to make those around you miserable, because see, that's a sign of weakness, right? You don't want to show that. So if you have an athlete who you are trying to get to improve their game through some behavior changes, a lot of it's like a light switch. You have to develop an elbow pass to a single leg, or some dynamic drilling, fake, elbow pass, push, score, right? That's dynamic setups, several together. We call that dynamic drilling. That's a skill. That takes a lot of time to develop it, but it's necessary. You're not going to win unless you develop that. It takes months, maybe even longer, to develop the feel of getting off bottom. It's not all mental. There's technique. It's not all technique. It's also a feel, just like walking a balance beam, skiing, ice skating. There's a feel involved, right? Basketball, dribbling efficiently. That's a feel, a rhythm, right? So there's a feel involved. That takes time. It takes time to develop and get strength. It might take 6 months to get strong if you have, weak legs, right? It takes time to develop flexibility. Some things don't take time. It's just a decision. I'm sick of being the kid who freaks out after a loss, and then it takes me 2 days to recover, and I certainly never come back and get third. You almost have to refuse that. Look in the mirror and say, you're weak. After you lose, you fall apart for a day and a half. It's embarrassing. Knock it off, right? Instead of saying, I'm going to do better, sometimes you're better off. Write down the things that you're going to refuse to allow any longer. I refuse to be the kid in the wrestling room who's not impressive. I refuse to be the kid in the weight room who talks, right? Instead of saying, I'm going to work harder in the weight room. You got to say, think about what you're doing that is wrong and embarrassing and costing you. And that's a habit. It's kind of a default. You go into default. After a water break, it takes me 10 minutes to get settled down and back into the flow of wrestling. You got to diagnose it through some self-awareness and self-evaluation. We do self-evaluation worksheets, right? In our 28-day wrestling camp. I want our athletes to completely immerse themselves in themselves so they can self-coach, self-monitor. And a big part of these behavior changes is not just writing down what you want to or will do better. A lot of it, at times, some of us, it's much more powerful to write down the things that you refuse to allow to happen any longer. Implement that exercise with your athletes. It works for us, and I think it will you as well. Good luck to everyone.